Listen to that sound. Beep. Approved. That synthetic chirp from the credit card terminal at the luxury boutique. In that exact millisecond, your brain floods with dopamine. The screen glows green. You walk out with the heavy, matte black paper bag, feeling like you have finally arrived. But examine the brutal reality of what just happened. You did not buy a symbol of success. You signed a voluntary confession of financial insecurity, initiating a permanent hemorrhage in your cash flow. Society engineered a spectacular lie, the illusion that wealth is measured by your capacity to acquire and parade premium liabilities. The system convinced the middle class that the rich buy brand new sports cars and haute couture. But these are precision-engineered traps designed to extract capital from those desperate to look successful. Let me ask you a question. Why does the corporate executive in the $80,000 European SUV sweat cold bullets every time the traffic light turns red, while the actual millionaire in the lane next to him is completely at peace behind the wheel of a 12-year-old Japanese sedan? The executive is suffocating under a 60-month auto loan. He is a hostage to his own leather seats. The millionaire understands the lethal difference between credit-fueled purchasing power and true wealth. Rule 1, the depreciation guillotine. The first purchase self-made millionaires absolutely refuse to make is the brand-new, financed luxury vehicle. The math is unforgiving. The moment you drive that $80,000 illusion off the lot, the guillotine drops. It loses 10 to 20% of its value before you park it. That is $8,000 to $16,000 wiped out instantly. Over 5 years, that car loses roughly 60% of its value, leaving you with an asset worth $32,000, while you paid over $90,000 factoring and interest. You traded $60,000 of future freedom to impress strangers in traffic. The self-made millionaire buys a used vehicle in cash and invests the rest. The second toxic acquisition is heavy logo designer clothing. This is the ultimate validation tax. Buying a $1,000 t-shirt with a luxury name across the chest is paying an astronomical premium to be a walking billboard. Self-made millionaires refuse this tax. They know loud luxury is a toll paid by the insecure. True wealth is silent. Relying on external logos to project value admits your intrinsic value is bankrupt. Those thousands poured into haute couture do not command respect. They signal to anyone who understands money that you are remarkably easy to separate from your capital. The sweat on the back of your neck when the credit card is processing isn't a glitch. It is the biological reality of living beyond your means catching up to your nervous system. You are working 40 to 50 hours a week in a sterile office, answering emails from a middle manager you fundamentally despise just to fund the aesthetic of a life you don't actually have the time to live. And because the modern worker is perpetually exhausted, the system engineered the perfect coping mechanism. They call it retail therapy. I call it the third purchase true millionaires categorically refuse to make, the emotional impulse buy. We are the first generation in human history to voluntarily purchase our own sedatives at retail price. Buying a $300 pair of sneakers or an overpriced handbag because you had a miserable Tuesday at the corporate firm is not a reward. It is a ransom payment to your own misery. The marketing agencies in those glass towers know exactly how tired you are. They monitor your late-night scrolling. They understand that when your willpower is depleted by a soul-crushing commute, you will look for an escape hatch. You won't cook. You will order a $40 delivery meal just to feel a fleeting sense of being served. You are eating the poisoned cheese, ignoring the steel bar hovering right above your neck. The credit card companies feed on this exact moment of fatigue. They thrive when you whisper to yourself that you deserve a treat. You don't deserve a temporary dopamine spike. You deserve autonomy, but you keep trading your leverage for a convenience that slowly bleeds you dry. Rule 3. The convenience hemorrhage. The fourth asset the wealthy completely ignore is the compulsive annual technological upgrade. Every 12 months, Silicon Valley rolls out a new glass rectangle. They change the camera lens layout by 2 millimeters, add a brushed titanium edge, and convince the working class that dropping $1,500 is an absolute necessity for modern survival. The wealthy see this for what it is, an embarrassment. Why would a self-made millionaire, someone who understands the sacred nature of capital accumulation, finance a pocket-sized slot machine just to scroll through the fabricated lives of other broke people? The system frames the new phone as a tool for productivity. That is a spectacular delusion. It is a consumption engine designed to serve you targeted advertisements with higher resolution. The real tragedy is the psychological, invisible cage it builds around your mind. You upgrade your technology to project relevance, but true relevance doesn't require a high-definition screen. It requires equity. When you sign a 36-month contract for a phone you cannot afford in cash, you are not securing a communication device. You are pledging your future labor to a telecommunications giant. You are spinning the plastic wheel, generating kinetic energy for an elite class that hasn't worried about a utility bill in 3 generations. Status anxiety is the most profitable disease ever invented. The cure is completely free, but the global economy would collapse tomorrow if people stopped trying to impress ghosts on the internet. The trap is mathematically flawless. You are stressed because you have zero financial margin. To cope with the stress, you buy premium distractions. The distractions consume your remaining margin, creating even more stress. It is a closed-loop circuit of permanent anxiety. The guy with the pristine smartwatch tracking his elevated heart rate doesn't realize the expensive watch itself is causing the panic. He is trapped in a maze, admiring the fresh paint job on the walls while the exits are quietly being bricked up. But the psychological damage is only the surface level of this disaster. When we rip open the floorboards and look at the raw, unfiltered numbers, the true horror of these daily decisions reveals itself. The system relies on your mathematical illiteracy. It thrives when you look at a monthly payment instead of the total cost. And nowhere is this more destructive than the fifth purchase self-made millionaires actively avoid: the over-leveraged primary residence, the McMansion. Society taught you to believe that your house is your greatest asset. It isn't. An asset puts money in your pocket. A heavily mortgaged house is a beautiful, climate-controlled liability that aggressively extracts liquidity from your bank account every single month. The middle class stretches their budget to the breaking point, signing a 30-year mortgage for an $800,000 house in a gated community, just to have 2 extra guest rooms that stay empty 11 months a year. Let's apply the only mathematical lens that actually matters: the opportunity cost. You decided to buy the $800,000 house instead of the $400,000 home that fit your actual needs. That extra $400,000 is financed at a 7% interest rate. Over 30 years, you aren't just paying back that principal. You are handing the bank over $900,000 in interest alone. The bank built a golden mousetrap, and you walked right in, handed them the keys to your future, and thanked them for the privilege of painting the walls. If you had taken the humble route, bought the smaller house, and invested the difference in a standard index fund, that money would have compounded into over $2 million. You didn't buy a larger kitchen. You sold your retirement. You traded decades of your finite, unrecoverable life to subsidize a bank's quarterly earnings report. Rule 4. The opportunity cost slaughter. Now apply this brutal math to the sixth purchase, the heavily financed status event, the $50,000 wedding. The wedding industry convinced the working class that taking out a personal loan to feed dry chicken to 200 people is a necessary milestone of adulthood. Here is my absolute rule on these performances. If you have to borrow capital to prove to a room full of strangers that you are successful, you are intrinsically bankrupt. The wealthy do not finance parties. They accumulate equity. Take that $50,000. Instead of burning it on a rented venue, a dress worn for 6 hours, and an overpriced photographer, put it into an index fund at an 8% average return. Leave it alone. In 30 years, that single decision compounds to over $500,000, $500,000 of liquid freedom, gone, vaporized into a single Saturday night. This is how the system keeps the pack running on the wheel. They don't have to force you to work until you are 65. They just have to convince you to voluntarily sabotage your own compounding interest in your 20s and 30s. Every dollar you spend to project an image is a soldier you are sending to die for someone else's empire. You are bleeding out on the battlefield of status, and you don't even realize you are losing. But the most insidious trap isn't the giant mortgage or the massive party. It is the quiet, invisible poison that infects your daily routine. When you finally start making a little bit of money, the invisible poison doesn't announce itself with a swipe of a credit card. It sneaks in the exact moment you get that corporate promotion or the moment your salary crosses into 6 figures. This brings us to the seventh and most lethal purchase that self-made millionaires categorically refuse to make. It is not a single physical object. It is a chronic, insidious disease. It is the voluntary, systematic inflation of your baseline existence. We call it lifestyle creep. When the conditioned middle class receives a $20,000 raise, their immediate response is to search for $20,000 worth of new problems to finance. They abandon the perfectly functional apartment for a luxury loft. They refuse to fly economy. They start frequenting minimalist restaurants where the aesthetic is expensive, but portions are microscopic. They absorb the new income so efficiently that their net wealth creation remains mathematically paralyzed at zero. They are generating more capital than ever before, yet they are still one missed paycheck away from total ruin. They haven't escaped the rat race. They merely upgraded the upholstery on the wheel they are running in. This brutal reality directly answers the core question we established at the beginning of this autopsy. Why does the polished executive in the $80,000 European SUV sweat cold bullets every time the traffic light turns red? Because he is a captive victim of his own upgraded baseline. He is suffocating under the crushing pressure of his bloated monthly burn rate. Every dollar he earns is legally assigned to a creditor before the direct deposit even clears. He cannot quit his miserable job. He cannot take a risk. He cannot breathe. And the quiet millionaire idling next to him in the 12-year-old Japanese sedan, he is experiencing the rarest human luxury, absolute psychological peace. He is at peace because he ruthlessly defended the gap between his income and his ego. He might generate $500,000 a year, but he structures his life as if he makes $60,000. That massive, invisible financial margin is his impenetrable armor. It buys him the ability to sleep 8 uninterrupted hours a night. It buys him the absolute power to say no to anyone, at any time, for any reason. Rule 5. the stealth wealth mandate. To permanently escape this engineered slaughterhouse, you must undergo a complete psychological rewiring. You need to cultivate a dark, almost sadistic pleasure in absolute social irrelevance. When you finally stop caring about how your lifestyle is perceived by a society drowning in consumer debt, you become completely unstoppable. Let your neighbors assume you are struggling. Let your colleagues whisper about your outdated wardrobe. Let the commissioned salesman look at you with thinly veiled condescension. Their judgment is simply the pathetic currency they use to cope with their own lifelong financial imprisonment. Refuse to engage in their exhausting theater. Take the thousands of dollars you were blindly throwing into the blazing furnace of social validation and quietly divert it into the ruthless compounding machinery of the global market. Turn the phantom need for external approval into cold, hard, invisible dividends. The financial system desperately wants you loud, flashy, and heavily leveraged. It needs you to be a predictable, endlessly consuming gear in its engine. To win this game, you must become a ghost in the machine. You must build an unassailable empire in the shadows, where the tax of public opinion cannot reach you. True wealth does not scream for attention. It whispers in compound interest. And while the rest of the world bleeds themselves dry just to look wealthy, you will quietly and inevitably become free.